My father always criticized me for the smallest things. If he found the light on when I wasn't in the room, he'd say, "Why don't you turn it off? Why waste all that electricity?" And if he found the faucet dripping, he'd yell, "Why don't you tighten it properly? Why waste all that water?" His criticisms never stopped, even when he was bedridden with illness. It seemed like I could never please him. The day finally came when I had my first job interview at a major company. It was my chance to leave home and live independently, far from my father's constant instructions. I woke up early that morning, dressed in my best clothes, applied some cologne, and got ready to leave. As I reached the door, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around to find my father smiling at me, despite the fatigue in his eyes and the signs of illness on his face. He handed me some money and softly said, "I want you to be positive, confident, and don't waver in front of any question." I accepted his advice reluctantly, forcing a smile while grumbling inside, thinking that this might be the last day I'd have to hear his instructions. I left the house quickly and hailed a taxi. On the way, I felt something heavy weighing on my chest, but I ignored it, absorbed in thoughts about my new future. When I arrived and walked through the company's gate, I noticed there were no guards, just signs directing candidates to the interview area. I saw that the door handle was loose and about to break. Remembering my father's advice to be positive, I fixed it and made sure it was secure. As I passed through the company garden, I saw the pathways flooded with water. My father's scolding about wasting water echoed in my mind, so I moved the hose to another basin and tightened the faucet. Then, as I entered the building and climbed the stairs, I noticed the numerous lights on, even though it was broad daylight. Hearing my father's voice in my head, I turned some of them off, imagining him shouting at me if I ignored it. I reached the upper floor, where the waiting room was packed with other candidates. I registered my name and sat down, observing the situation. Everyone who went into the interview came out in less than a minute. I started to feel anxious, noticing how polished the other candidates were and how their qualifications far surpassed mine. Feeling inadequate, I almost decided to leave. But just then, the staff member called my name. I entered the interview room and sat down in front of 3 individuals. They looked at me with a strange smile before one of them asked, "When would you like to start the job?" I thought the question was a joke or some form of mockery. Recalling my father's advice to stay confident, I replied firmly, "After I pass the interview successfully." Another interviewer laughed and said, "You've already passed." I was confused. "But no one asked me a single question," I said. The third person replied, "There's no need for questions. We've been observing the behavior of the candidates before they enter the interview. We saw how you fixed the door, addressed the water issue, and turned off the lights. This is exactly what we're looking for. Someone who's proactive and mindful of the company's resources." At that moment, the company and the job no longer mattered to me. All the faces faded away, and the only image in my mind was my father's face. I realized that every criticism, every harsh word, had been his way of shaping me into a better person. But I had been blind to it all. I saw him now for who he truly was. A strong figure whose outward toughness masked a deep love and care. I rushed back home as if racing against time. But every step felt heavier, and every street seemed longer than it actually was. When I reached the house, I saw my relatives and neighbors gathered, their eyes filled with sorrow. I understood everything. I was too late. My father was gone. I missed his voice, his scolding, his advice that I used to consider a burden. Why hadn't I seen him for who he truly was? How could I have been so blind to his kindness and sacrifice? How had I missed the love behind every word, the guidance in every criticism? Your departure is bitter, Father. You were the one who was truly devoted to us, and we didn't honor you as you deserved. You may have left us physically, but you will always remain in my heart, in my prayers, in every prayer I offer to the heavens. May God have mercy on you, Father, and grant you a place in his paradise. You will remain alive in every good deed I do, in every lesson I learned from you. You have not truly died. You will live on in my prayers, my love, and in the lessons I didn't realize until it was too late.